here. I'm a former commissioner, so I'm used to having like 20 people waiting on me while I come up and approach the podium. So this is like a little bit of a new experience. Not 24, excuse me. I never had that. You talk about money. It's not about money. During my 4 years there as Commissioner of Education, it went about $7,000 per child. Per pupil spending down to $6,200 last year, and just brutal budget debates. Economy is tough, and during that same time frame, we saw the graduation rate toughen. The definition of what a graduate is, excluding groups of kids and so forth, made it more difficult to count a child as a graduate. We increased over those 4 years by 10 percentage points. So it is definitely not about money. Just a brief note about my background and experience. You have some information in your folder, but I consider myself to be a professional public school educator. I started out as a classroom teacher, pushing the little carts from classroom to classroom, and was a high school principal of a very successful high school in Florida. Assistant superintendent, superintendent of schools for 17 years in 3 states. And finally moved back to Florida, taking on the role as Commissioner of Education, and greatly honored to do that, as I am honored to be here with you today. I say my background, though, for a reason. During that time frame, I've been in the business now for just shy of 40 years, which makes me pretty old, I guess. But I've seen a lot of things kind of come and go. And the focus of change, where you can impact the real difference, move the needle, make an impact in education during those 40 years, for me as an educator, has changed also. There was a time when this room would have been discussing how you impact the change in the classroom. And the focus of change would have been the classroom. Then there would have been the time when you talked about the schoolhouse as being the focus of change. And then a brief period of time we talked about the district. And I would have been advocating that. I would have been right there with you, saying the district is definitely the place of change. That's where you're close to the action, make it happen. My thinking about that started to change when I took the role of superintendent of schools in Charlotte, North Carolina. And Jim Hunt, governor at the time, was aggressively going after state accountability. This is before No Child Left Behind implementation. I've done a great job implementing the North Carolina model. I've been working in Charlotte, had been studying the Texas accountability structure that had been put in place, again, before No Child Left Behind by then Governor George W. Bush, his administration. They had tweaked the Texas model to have accountability for disaggregated results. And I remember meeting with Jim Hunt saying, we don't do that in North Carolina. And we should, because Texas has been able to reduce the gap between subgroups more rapidly than North Carolina had. And North Carolina, Governor Hunt went back, we tweaked the legislation in North Carolina, he tweaked the legislation in North Carolina, added that feature to the legislation, and we started to move on the reduction of the gap as well. The message in that, why I say that, is that I learned in that process that states that choose to get into the deep end of the pool, states that choose to play in the success of their children and strategize around it, and what state policy means, what state funding means, and the impact of policy and funding on the achievement of not all children in mass, but each individual child, subgroups, those with greater needs and others and so forth. Those states that choose to get into it and think this thing through in a very deliberative, very strategic fashion can make a profound difference. And I'll take that to the next level, and that's when I went to Florida, and prior to my move to Florida, studying the work of Governor Jeb Bush throughout the 2000s and the tail of the 1990s. Over the last decade, packaged this up in a way that put a whole new definition to the impact and the capacity of a state that, as Yogi Berra would say, knows where it wants to go and sets out on the mission to do it and to achieve it. Governor Bush and the Florida program that got underway well before I got involved as commissioner. I kind of picked it up for the last 4 years, and it continue to. My biggest fear was that I'd mess it up somehow, and so we want to keep pushing this boulder up the hill. But it underscores the fact that states that wish to make a difference and move their state to a new level, state policy, state funding, is the factor, in my view now, as a professional public school educator, is the factor that can drive that kind of outcome. And my remarks today hopefully will show that. I would talk about the last 4 years down in Florida, some of the results probably most proud of. If you track along with Ed Week, it's a publication that comes out. It conducts a survey of the quality of education in each one of the states called Quality Counts. It comes out annually. When I started down in Florida, we were 31st. When I left, we were 5th in the nation. And based on NAEP scores, college readiness, and other kind of factors. As I said, the graduation rate went up 10 percentage points. We reduced the gap in graduation rate by minorities. The strongest improvement was among African American students. And the list goes on. So we were able to drive state policy to a different kind of outcome. So again, it's a great pleasure to be with you today. I'm going to do my best to manage this PowerPoint and not go in reverse. And if that works, then we're going to be in good shape. A little bit about Florida. This will be my first test. A little bit about Florida. 2.7 million children. The letter of engagement. I was an at-will employee in Florida. My letter of engagement as commissioner from the chairman of the state board was 2 lines. Your start date is this. Your salary is this. All in the first sentence. The second sentence was your responsibility is to take care of 2.7 million children in Florida. And I loved that letter. I framed it. It's a great letter because that was my job. My job wasn't all the politics and things that go on in the state of Florida. My job was 2.7 million children and make sure that their life is successful each and every day they show up in one of our schools. We are a very diverse state. We're a majority-minority state. And right at, on a given day, you never know how to count it with the economy right now, but we're probably a majority low-income student enrollment in the state of Florida. So we have, if you're one of those who thinks that outcomes are all driven by demographics, we're a poster child for where it shouldn't work, where progress should not be made, that there's every kind of burden that you can imagine in Florida, non-English speakers, huge immigration rate to our schools, and lots of reasons why we should have the biggest excuse of anyone out there in the country. And as you can see, you've already seen the slide, that's not, back in the 1990s, legislators, state leaders were concerned because we were so low in national comparison. 4th grade reading on NAEP, National Assessment of Educational Progress, you can see well below the performance level of Kansas, for example. Over the last decade, we've been able to move that up aggressively. That is not random acts and great expectations that drove that return. That was specific, tailored, crafted state policy that drove those kinds of numbers. And you can see where we are today, and the expectation is we're going to continue to drive that number north and do even better. Certainly, you here in Kansas have great performance levels, and if anybody can do it, it can be done here in Kansas if the state leadership chooses to do so. There are some primary levers that the state chose to go after to drive these kind of results, and there's 6 of them identified here. I'm going to go through them in detail, but the move to an A through F grading system, the clarity around that, which I'll speak to in a minute, is stunning. The simplicity of it is stunning, and is a huge catalyst for change. Rewards for results. Once you grade, you have to have a way to recognize success and deal with failure. Issues about individual children, do you just simply move them along because they're a little bit bigger in the seats? Or do you have time frames when you say, enough is enough, we've got to get this right before we ask a child to move forward and experience further failure? Using funding in a way that isn't just block grants going out and funding buckets to districts to use as the status quo has always been used, but using funding as a way to drive different kind of outcomes. Huge discussion around quality of educator, and that's been on our chart for the last decade and has intensified in the last couple of years. And choice, 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 choice. At the end of the day, speaking of choices, we offer public education to folks here in America, but you know, I look at a parent and I think parents have the primary responsibility for things like clothing their child and the health and the nutrition of their child. And I would certainly hope that parents have the responsibility for making sure the child is properly educated. And I could not think of any worse punishment or any worse thing to live through as a parent than to have a child and you have great expectations for their future and know that they are assigned to a school where all statistics will tell you that they are not going to succeed and they have no way out. So choice, choice, choice became a major one of our levers for adjustment. A little bit on the A to F grading system for schools, and I'm going to do a little bit of a deep dive on this. I hope I don't put anybody to sleep. The copies in the back of the room don't leave because there's a punchline at the end is great. But I want to go through these 6 policies with you, piece of legislation, because it isn't just grading schools; it's how you grade schools. It's there is the detail that makes it a significant, made it something that moved the state rather than something that was just another legislative act. A little bit about grading schools. The foundation for the accountability system, the school grading system, is based on the measurement of individual student performance. In 2001, we started measuring student learning in grades 3 through 10 on an annual basis. Florida was actually ahead of the game again, like Texas and North Carolina and others, before No Child Left Behind was enacted. And our tests are aligned to state standards, which we have moved up. We don't have a truncated schedule performance level for you, but we have moved our expectation. I'll show you how that impacted our work. But 3 is a scale of 1 through 5 on individual students' performance on the FCAT, 3 being on grade level. And that's a very important aspect. Parents understand on grade level, and they understand if the child's below or above grade level as well. So how we structured up the initial individual student performance was important, and that's the basis of all the rest of our structure. In 1995, we started moving into school identification, and as is shown on this particular slide, we still hadn't moved to an A through F structure. We use different terminology: high performing, performing, low performing, critical. These words are nice words for educators, but they really don't mean much to mom and dad. And the move to A through F was significant in the communication of what work was going on within the school. It wasn't a fuzzy descriptor. It was very clear. Everybody understood it. If you were a C school, they got it. And as a result, people started to move to a different direction, and it did create a new mission. And that took place in the early 2000s, where we moved to the A through F structure. And the basis on the A through F, again, is solely based on individual student performance. School grades in elementary and middle school are based on the FCAT performance. That was the case for high schools until last year, where we expanded the grading of the high school to include more factors, including graduation rate, for example. An important feature of the school grading program is that half the grade is based on proficiency, the percent of students who are performing on grade level. That's half the score. And the other half is based on progress. And again, I think that nuance of the grading system is a very important one, because that's what you want schools to do. You want them to perform, but you also want them to show progress with students that are below grade level. So half the progress measure is actually focused on the lowest 25% of the students in each school, because each school does have a bottom 25%. In case you might be wondering also, in our formula we did not have any special weighting for demographics or socioeconomic status. So it's strictly based on student performance. And the focus on the bottom 25% is one of the elements in our school grading program that has forced Florida to move the reduction of the gap so dramatically as it has seen over time. I was a principal of one of those schools that could easily ignore the bottom 25% and always be considered one of the top high schools in the state of Florida. Very easily done if it's not outed and brought to people's attention. The grading structure is set as follows. The grading process is simple and straightforward. Schools earn up to 100 points each for the percent of students who perform on grade level in reading, math, writing, and science. Schools earn up to 100 points each for the percent of all students who made a year's worth of progress in a year's time in reading and mathematics. So if you're below grade level but you make a year's worth of progress, you still get credit for that at the school. To make sure the school focus on students, bottom students, there's 100 points each for the percent of lowest performing students who make annual progress in reading and mathematics. So how this would look in a calculation for Sunshine Middle School in Florida, in order to get a B, you add up the percentages, get the number, run it against the formula, and you get the school grade that gets publicized widely. This is how these numbers break out in Florida. Again, policy decisions. Won't go into the excruciating detail about modeling and so forth, about what can be accommodated within the state, what's the outcome going to look like, but a great deal of modeling as we try to determine our best way to structure up the school grading process. High schools are a bit more complex, and again, this is legislation that was enacted over the last 4 years and implemented in 2010. And this is like a day's conference in itself, the high school, because high school is the battleground for America in education. It is the toughest nut to crack. And we expanded away from reading, math, science, writing, and so forth to other factors, which has driven incredible change in the kind of work, the focus of the work in our high schools, and the kind of opportunity that our students have been able to receive. We focus on graduation rate for all students. We also look at graduation rate for at-risk students. At-risk students are defined as students that enter 9th grade below grade level and graduate within 4 years. So again, the high school can't skate on a large population of simply high-performing students that they tend to successfully. We also measure acceleration rates, and these I think are having stunning results. And in 10 years from now, the results on this in the high schools out of Florida is going to be absolutely incredible. But focus on acceleration and this notion about trying to blur the boundaries between high school and post-secondary is part of the high school philosophy and belief system. But we measure participation and performance rates for students in advanced placement, international baccalaureate, dual enrollment with our community college system, and a very well-defined industry certification where students are required to pass nationally recognized industry certification tests. And finally, on college readiness as measured by the SAT and ACT. The results of the Florida A+ plan, the school grading plan, this is where this room has to get engaged, because if a state chooses, like Kansas chooses to do something like this, back in, 1999, tough year. School grading is implemented, more D and F schools in the state of Florida, which was correct. If you look at the NAEP results, where we were in our national level of performance, more D and F schools in the state of Florida than A and B schools. You can imagine that Governor Bush's phone rang a little bit, and some legislators started to get a little wobbly on their support for this bold new reform effort. Now we see
we have 10 times as many A and B schools than D and F schools. So a little bit of celebration, probably not as good as it should have been the year after, and a shift in performance, but you can see that the results have continued to move forward. And this hasn't been a static case where the laws were all passed in 99, 2000, implemented, and just sit back because we've done all that. Now let's move on to something else, some other problem solved. But in each one of those years where you see the dashed line going through the timeline there, those are times that we've had significant changes in what is required to earn your school grade. So such as adding student learning gains to the calculations, adding students with disabilities and English language learners, and so forth and so on. And then the high school adjustment back in 2010, which added a great deal of adjustments to the calculation. So even in spite of what's important about this chart is you can see either the performance after an increase in demand and expectation, performance continued, even moved up more rapidly, or it had a dip, and the year after, it moved up more aggressively than it was before. So every time there's a demand by the state leadership, we're going to ratchet it up. There is huge moaning and groaning about this is impossible and unfair. And then once implemented, the response and the impact on children is huge. So that's a law that's written down someplace. That is the way it will always happen in well-crafted legislation that gets rolled out. So you have a lot of on-the-ground stuff that I won't go through that is tied up with the school grading process. But once you have school grading in place, then again the questions about rewards and for success. How do you recognize success in this is a major piece of it. So school recognition in Florida, we've never been an extraordinarily wealthy state, and so you always worry about money. So it's not so much new money to give rewards, but it's how do you use the money that you have. I guess that's the way we approached it. When schools succeed, we reward them with cash. Think of that. We reward them with cash. Schools who earn an A or improve a letter grade, even if it was from an F to a D level, they earn $75 per student for their achievement. The school does. The reward money goes directly to the school. It doesn't bypass through the school district and collective bargaining and so forth and so on. Instead, the principal, teachers, parents get to decide how to spend the money once the school receives it for their success. 85% of the time, the bonus money is usually used and distributed to the faculty and staff as in the form of a bonus. But again, this one incentive is extraordinarily powerful incentive. So we've been able to accomplish that through wise use of existing dollars. Similarly, when schools fail, we had consequences as well. Students in schools that got an F for 2 consecutive years were given state funds to go to schools of their choice, public, private, or religious. I thought it was a great idea. It is a great idea. It was called Opportunity Scholarships. Doesn't matter what you call it. You can call it a scholarship, you can call it a voucher, you can call it a grant, whatever you want to call it. But it was an opportunity for mom and dad in a failing school to make a choice about their child's future. Unfortunately, Florida Supreme Court ruled the program unconstitutional. And of note, in the last year of the program, because this has to do with programs like voucher programs and others, in the last year of the program, just 753 students participated in this choice. 95% were minorities, 75% were poor children eligible for free and reduced lunch. Hundreds of thousands of students were eligible, but only a tiny percent opted for the public school choice. Our experience busts the myth that vouchers will cause a mass exodus from public education and public schools. It didn't happen. In fact, public schools improved when choice, even for a small number of children, improved when students have choice to go elsewhere. There is research that's been done on this. It's pretty significant. Manhattan Institute, and you can read this for yourself. Manhattan Institute, Cornell University, failing schools respond to the threat of vouchers by raising student achievement. Harvard University, choice provisions for the A+ plan, leverages student achievement gains, and so forth. As a result, if you study this further about this form of choice, they found that the schools that had one F grade in their history did statistically significantly better than similar D grade schools. As you can see, the year Florida Supreme Court took away the private school choice, there was no difference in the performance of our D or grade schools. When private choice was taken away, the learning gains disappeared. So again, a significant, as states think about this as an option, an arrow in their quiver as possibilities. I think the research is very clear on this. The third strategy, what about kids and their progress? So we base the school grading structure around individual students. Promotion and retention, graduation requirements, all those become factors that are important. And I would say this, I get into this, been very significant the work we've done in Florida around promotion and retention after third grade based on reading performance. It's not just, though, the issue of retention policy. It's the wraparound about what do you do around that. The rest, I'll explain, it was a full court press around reading instruction. So it wasn't just passage of a retention policy, but it was all the rest of the focus on reading, now pre-K through 3 and beyond. But it was a full package of effort by the state. And so a little bit about promotion and retention. Florida ensured there was a hard-line test-based promotion policy for students to enter 4th grade. We also leveraged the use of federal reading funds back in those days, the Reading First funds, and didn't just formula fund the use of funds, both federal and state. Didn't just formula fund them to every county, but instead we made them competitive grants, so districts had to actually apply for them. These were reviewed by the plans were reviewed by the state. They were competitive and so forth. And we did a lot of work with the Center for Reading at FSU in our development policies and so forth. And as a result of the use of these funds and other funds, the creation of a funding pool that required the implementation of reading coaches in grades K through 2, we saw pretty significant results in terms of the outcome for children. Reading is a foundation for learning. When you can read, you can learn. And 3rd grade is an important time to think about it. These kids have been in school for kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4 years in the presence of public educators. There's a point where you have to say enough is enough. Reading is a foundation for learning, and you have to have this foundation to be successful later on. 3rd and 4th grades are critical years because that's when students transition from learning to reading to learn. The fact is, students who can't read in 3rd grade don't typically catch up in later grades. Instead, they fall further and further behind. Promoting students who don't have grade level skills to succeed also creates huge challenges for teachers. Until 2002, teachers typically made the recommendation whether to retain a student. That year, we decided we needed to require retention for students who were functionally illiterate at the end of 3rd grade. Students who scored the lowest level are retained unless students meet some good cause exemptions. And so, again, the details in the policy. All right, Coach, what do I do here?
Like,
All right. Thank you very much, Coach. That's like a reading coach from kindergarten through 2nd grade. Right there on the spot, immediate feedback, tell you what to do, move on. So, good cause exemptions. What are they? Sometimes states will look at this stuff and create a huge, what I call a hole in the boat. So you might as well not have gone through the struggle of passing the law in the first place because there's so many outs that it doesn't really matter and it doesn't have any impact. But we created 6 good cause exemptions. You can see these here. I won't read them for the sake of time. But we're sensitive to issues that are unique to an individual child. But we also don't make excuses because of those unique characteristics of individual kids. So onto the data. What did this show us? And what does this show about political leadership, political will, state will, all the factors. Is that back in '01 and '02, prior to the passage of the legislation, around 3% of our third graders were retained. You can imagine Governor Bush's phone this year. 13.2% of our third graders retained in the first year of implementation. But look at what's happened since then. And I attribute this, one, to the statement by the state of Florida that having kids capable to read on a grade level by the end of third grade is important to the state of Florida. And so educators get busy and get it right. And here's the wraparound. Here are the things we're going to do, funding and so forth that we've devoted to this, the attention given to it, and over time, the bureaucracy has gotten better. And you can see we have steadily gone down year after year after year on the retention rate. Now we're down to 5.9% retention in 2010. And as a result, more individual children are being promoted up with the skills needed to be successful later on. So again, a powerful implementation of a very challenging statute, but one that made a difference for children. End of the day, made a difference for children. So middle school students have also made great progress over the last decade, moving from 48% to 62% of students reading on grade level. But notice that how flat their performance was over the several years in the early years, the first half of that chart. But then in 2006, we saw a big jump. That was the year that third graders that had been retained or promoted on grade level were allowed to move up, and you can see the results on middle school performance. Middle school teachers would report for the first time they had students coming into their middle schools that were ready to do the work that they required. So it has an effect that goes all the way up. We've actually seen the effect in high schools now as that bubble of students continues to move forward and changing the way we see high school performance. Retention works. Research has confirmed it. Manhattan Institute researcher Jay Green studied Florida's third grade retention policy after just 2 years and found retained third graders made significant compared to socially promoted students. These gains actually grew substantially from the first to the second year after retention. Students who are socially promoted appear to fall farther behind over time. Retention policies have made the greatest impact on minority student learners. Graduation requirements. Again, we've tweaked that a lot over time. We raised the bar on what is required to graduate from a Florida high school. Before 2002, we had a high school graduation test. It was benchmarked at the 8th grade level. You can imagine that, middle school performance to graduate from high school. That level was raised up to 10th grade performance level in 2002. Again, a lot of moans that everyone was going to drop out of school and not be able to make it. In fact, we saw the exact opposite happen. And this, again, goes back to the law. It should be a law of science that every time you raise the state raises expectation, the organization, the bureaucracy responds, and kids respond in a way that is stunning. So you can see the increase in the graduation rate over time. In the state of Florida, we've been relentless about it, about the definition of what is a graduate and what is it, how to measure that. And you can see the reduction in the gap. Let's take this majority-minority. You can't function if you don't move those numbers together over time. And the impact on post-secondary, this is not Florida policy, this is Eric Smith policy. And I think graduation rate is great. It's what happens after graduation that really matters to a child. And so post-secondary impact of this increased graduation rate and increased readiness has been significant. 13% increase in high school graduates who pursued post-secondary education within the year after graduating has created a mild crisis among our institutions of higher learning, and that they have to figure out how to pay for it. But anyway, funding for student success. I'll go through this one fairly quickly, but I'll give you one primary example. I think it's a great one. Funding quite often to the state just comes in big clumps. You know, this is the way it comes out. And, prior to 1999, we had several pots of money in our funding formula, like summer school and dropout was an example, for students who didn't get the material the first time around. We decided to change this perverse incentive and instead took all of those pots of money for summer school and things that people think are just really, really great, and instead put the money in a new categorical. We told districts we will get this money no matter what, but you must use the funds to improve your DNF schools, and you must use the funds to help your third graders who can't read, and you must use the funds to help your high school students that aren't in line for graduation on time. And after that, you can use the money for whatever you want. But we did define at the state level some priorities for it. The previous incentive was really a system of funding failure. And the new incentive, as a result of the new incentive, districts started canceling summer school, instead implemented after-school tutoring programs, which is proving to be more effective, and Saturday classes for students that were more on time, which I did in 6 minutes. Also incentivized rigor. This is another full-day conference. Love to come back sometime. This is a science. This one here, incentivizing rigor, what Florida did, partnered up with the College Board to expand access to rigorous advanced placement courses. PSAT was administered to all 10th grade students. There is a way to benchmark PSAT performance against AP potential. We train teachers with matching funds from the College Board to better prepare teachers to effectively teach the more rigorous courses. And we rewarded teachers for student success. Schools already received $700 for every student who passed an AP exam, but we started giving, the schools did, we started giving the teachers a $50 cash bonus for every student that got a passing score out of the $700. And for teachers in a D or an F school, they earned $500 for the first student each year who passed the AP exam. As a result of this state focus on college-level rigorous coursework, you can see these are pass scores. These aren't sitting in the classroom. These are pass scores. It doesn't match our growth in Florida. This outstrips everything in terms of performance. Not only are more students taking AP exams, more students are passing the exams. 250% increase over that time period. For the kids, that quite often people say, well, you know, we've got real demographic issues that make it challenging. Well, for Hispanic student pass rate, you can see that growth, a 365% increase in Hispanic performance on advanced placement. For African American children, 361% increase in the pass rate for African American children on the AP exams. And so, again, stunning results. Fifth strategy, quality educators. Back in 2002, the initial effort was to open up access to those who could be teachers. It was it was trapped within the colleges of education. And you had to pass through the portals of university colleges of education to be deemed qualified to teach in a school in Florida. And you had to be certified by the Department of Education, all-knowing Department of Education. We opened that up to a variety of alternative pathways, which included alternative certification that could be granted by a district for those that have the proper degrees. It opened it up to other states that have certified teachers to teach. It opened it up to state colleges, community colleges, to offer 4-year degrees. And as a result, in 2000 and 2004, by 2004, we hired more teachers through these alternative sources than through the primary delivery source. This last year, this year, 2011, whatever that is, last 2 years, we went through some major battles in Florida over defining new methods of evaluating educators, both principals and teachers. 2013-14, we begin with 50% of a teacher's or principal's evaluation will be based on student progress. The progress for a teacher would be based on 3 years of data on student progress on state or district created tests. The principal principal evaluation would be based upon the overall student learning gains of students in the school on those tests. We eliminated LIFO. So we make decisions about reduction in force based not on seniority, but based on performance. Principals have the authority to not accept the placement of a teacher in their school who is not rated effective, and parents who are placed in a classroom with teachers who are evaluated as ineffective or need improvement must be notified of this designation. Kind of puts the parents back where they need to be in charge of their child's education as those most responsible. And then on to choice, the sixth strategy. And we have a broad array of choice options in Florida. I'm going to touch these quickly, but they're critically important. Critically important because it changes the whole dynamic of the business of educating children and the role everybody plays, whether it's a closed shop, no way out, my way, the highway, or whether you have to be thoughtful about the needs of the children and whether you're meeting those needs or not. The McKay Scholarship, corporate tax credit, charter schools, virtual schools, vouchers for pre-kindergarten. Today, more than 300,000 students participate in some sort of school choice in Florida. I'll start with the McKay Scholarship. McKay Scholarship for students with disabilities serve about 20,000 students. About half of them are minority students. As you will experience with your own recently passed Nicole Henry Scholarship, even when we give choice to all 500,000 of our students with disabilities, less than 5% actually choose to attend a private school. Research shows that parents of students with disabilities actually are more satisfied just having the choice, even if that choice is not exercised. The Florida tax credit, about 27,000 students annually receive corporate tax credit scholarships. Participation is likely to grow in the future because of the change in the law. About 60% are minority and all of the students are poor. The program is designed to give financial freedom to families who can't afford to opt out of the public schools. This year, the legislation made some incredible, important improvements to the program. And again, we can get more detail to you on that because of time. The next is charter schools. 137,000 students participating. There is no cap on charter schools in Florida. The more the better, we feel. If they don't work, we close them down in 2 years. So again, the pressures on charter schools to not simply be there, but be successful in their work. We now have we have municipalities opening charters. Very innovative work with our state, our community colleges, opening charter schools in partnership, and are proving to be very, very successful. And we have corporations that are opening charter schools in the workplace. So the results that we see from the work around charter schools, Florida charter schools, and enrollment increases have been steady. We have more than 100,000 students attending charter schools in Florida. And the last piece on my list there was the voluntary pre-kindergarten, which really is one of the biggest voucher programs we have in the state. Virtual education is extremely powerful. 134,000 students participating in virtual education. Highly effective. It has some magic sauce rolled into it where we have virtual tutors that work with kids. I've actually seen parents who tear up saying the virtual teacher has been the most influential teacher of their child's 12-year experience in public education. So virtual education is a very viable choice for those that are enrolled in Florida schools and elsewhere. A little bit about results. This particular chart, and again, in terms of student performance, all these policies have led to rise in student achievement. And minority students are making the greatest progress. Florida, fourth grade African American students read as well or better than the average student in 8 states. And Florida's fourth grade Hispanic students read as well or better than the average student in 31 states. In fact, Florida is one of only 3 states recognized for closing the achievement gap for minorities and low-income students. Certainly the message that we have, and that I've learned over my career, is that if the state will is there, it can happen. And it can happen anywhere. It can happen right here in Kansas. Thank you all very much. Appreciate the opportunity to get you guys.
We have time for a couple of quick questions. Any takers?
Yes. The A through F schools that were consistently down there, what was the commonality among all those schools that just never seemed to improve?
Extraordinarily low expectations in the classroom. They're just incredibly low. Incredibly low. And this is another rule. I could walk into any low-performing school here in Kansas and see the same thing. It is extremely low expectations, extremely, as a result, extraordinarily low level of instruction. Quite often a high school that's low performing, the instruction will be somewhere around the 3rd grade level. Might be working hard, might even be well disciplined. At the end of the day, they can't pass the test.
And there was no solution or state mandate?
Oh yeah, it's again, over that time, if I had to go to that particular slide, another day's conference, but we focused in doing, we're aggressively, we don't, under the Constitution, we don't have the ability to close schools at the state level, but we force districts into a position where they have to close them, and either open up a charter or outside management group, and you have to change the way you're doing business. I've got 13 schools in that queue right now.
2 questions at the mic, and quick, and then we'll have quick answers, and we'll try to get back on schedule a little bit.
Well, you asked for tough questions, and maybe this is just an inconsistency I don't understand, but we talked about money not being an answer, yet on slide 32, you talked about for the low-performing DNF schools that you prioritize $700 million funding to those schools, and I think you credited that with some improvements. So maybe that's an inconsistency I'd like to see explained. Thank you.
Yeah. Let's see here in my notes. Yeah, there was a lot of reprioritizing of funds that, for example, through the lottery funding and so forth, that went out just simply as block funding to districts. That money was reprioritized and given out for very specific purposes, and that's a lot of it was redirecting of existing funds rather than bringing in new dollars.
My wife's an educator here in Kansas, and 2 of my 3 daughters are involved in education. One of the things that I would like to see, and I don't know if you all have considered it, a lot of the teachers are saddled with students that don't have much incentive because their parents are on social services. And is there anything that you can do as far as reward and punishment for parents who don't fully participate or help with the education of the student?
Yeah, we haven't gone quite that far yet, at least during my term there in Florida. But we've had that discussion about how do you help to incent parents and community leadership, and particularly in areas that are really deeply entrenched, low criminal.
Well, these times where we're getting higher numbers, and they just came out yesterday at poverty level and people on food stamps and other services, I think it makes it difficult for teachers when there's no motivation. In other words, it used to be, you want to pick up a shovel or you want to go to college, and now it's just somebody will help you fill out your form.
But definitely not interested in just helping you fill out forms.
On page 5, page 5 under, pardon me, grading Florida's high schools, you mentioned business standards. The students would need to meet business standards. Did I understand that correctly?
It's one of the neat, really great modifications made to the high school grading program, AP and IB and all that, but it wasn't business standards, just industry certification. And we have a fairly elaborate structure working with business councils to identify industry areas that are important to local business, and then have a state-approved, legislatively approved list of nationally recognized industry certification exams. And part of the high school accountability would reward a school for increasing enrollment of students and success of the kids in those industry certification areas. And that's what that refers to.
Well, I guess I misspoke and spoke in my tag or whatever. Red flag went up when I heard that. Are you familiar with certificates of advanced placement and this type of thing? Have you ever heard of those?
No.
Well, it will be coming because it is tied into these international standards. And this really is emanating from the United Nations. One thing that got me into being so interested in education years ago, I'd been reading about it and kept hearing references to a United Nations study. No name, no author's name, no name of the study. Ultimately, in my reading, I ran across the name and the title, and I knew what I needed to do, which was to call the United Nations, see if that study was still available. Yes, it was. I did purchase the study. When I read it, this was done in the early to mid-70s, and the author of this study indicated that to put this, the study was about putting in place the world's education plan, not the United States, the world's. And he said at this time, the stumbling block to implementing this was the United States, whose citizens were overeducated. Too many of them were going on to college and university. So clearly, when you've seen things that have come down the pike in recent years, I believe an intentional dumbing down, up to perhaps this effort by Florida and others who, it's high time people woke up, because there is little correlation, some of course, between the amount of revenue spent and an academic outcome. K-12, I personally believe, should be all about a good liberal arts underpinning. Then let Susie and Johnny determine what they want to do with their life, how to go about it, perhaps even to fail. That's where you get often your greatest learning, is through failure. That is truly liberty and freedom. The sooner we get rid of the Federal Department of Education, our education in this country, we will be very competitive again. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith, for joining us. I apologize. We'll get contact information so we can follow up with questions. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Like I said, we're just going to try to power through from session to session, so please feel free to refresh or step out as you need to. Right now I want to welcome